Surf's up. We're with another Mauisnake episode, and we are here with Ryan Central to talk more about Deadlock. As you guys may have realized by now, I'm doing these every single week with a different, say, player, influencer, content creator, coach even, what have you, somebody that's involved with the Deadlock space, as I'm getting incredibly invested into it, not only the game, but following what's going on around it in terms of high-level meta, because it's kind of awkward right now. We don't really know necessarily like what's the best, what's the worst. We see that some people are in the watch tab, which kind of means that there's a hidden elo that's probably influencing who's on that watch tab. But right now, it's sort of the Wild West in terms of figuring out what is great versus what is just good in terms of meta. But Ryan, got you with me here. For people that don't know, Ryan was part of various S-tier Valorant broadcasts at the Valorant Champions event, twice at their Masters event as well. And so Deadlock's caught your eye, but welcome to the show, first of all, Ryan.
Thank you for having me. The new craze at the moment for trying to work out how good people are is Nico score, which is you remember like the Tracklock website that
Yes.
people are, that sort of came back with its own system where it basically is like how close you are to the first tab. So people go to the watch tab in game, they're like the highest MMR games going on. So it tries to work out what your like Nico score is. So that's what people are using to like justify their skills at the game, which is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. It's not even like people getting upset about a PNG picture in a game, right? As a rank, it's people getting upset about a random like MMR system that's on a completely different website
Yeah.
that got stopped from doing it before, has tried to find another way. So yeah, like Deadlock just keeps giving when it comes to like content like that. It's just so funny
Wait,
that people are getting mad about it.
do you know how that works? And for people that aren't following and don't know what Tracklock is, it's probably like the first website that people were able to find that sort of went through what I think was the API that was available and then was able to extract the actual ELO or MMR that Valve was kind of hiding from the users. And now
Yeah.
it's created its own system to try to, I guess, assume your ELO, but do you know anything that goes behind that?
Not really. Like they've tried to give more and more explanations, but I think it was just like they were scrubbing data from the games itself because nobody has API access at the moment, I don't think. And then I feel like the main thing is like it's a playtest for Valve, so I think they're a little bit like if people keep getting influenced about what heroes have the best win rate, what items are really good, that it sort of warps what they're trying to test, whether characters are good or bad, where they're good and bad. And I think that's the main reason why Valve have just been a bit like you could do this later. Don't do it now. We need people to stop going around going, "Oh, Seven's the best hero in the game," when he clearly isn't. It's just a he pub stomps people with his ultimate in the early days, right? So I
Yeah.
think it is just some form of system where it's like going through the watch tab from left to right, who's the highest MMR, and it's not even like whether you win the games. It's just how high is the average Nico MMR system in
Yeah.
the lobby. So I could like queue up with some of the like pro players in North America up my score, but we could just get absolutely destroyed and it wouldn't matter. So, yeah, it's not a perfect system. It's interesting to look at if you have a score, but I wouldn't judge your life based off of it, especially at this point, right?
Yeah, yeah. Pouring your time into trying to get your Nico score higher is probably just going to influence people to queue up with people. It's not the right way to go about this. And I'm glad that you referenced the fact that the reason that Valve is probably doing this and not showing people's MMR yet because, people are grinding right now. They want to imagine that their elo is improving, but if you're a company like Valve, you're just trying to balance everything. I don't know what technical stage the game is in right now, whether it's still technically considered like an invite only alpha or a closed beta, what have you. But if I'm them and I'm trying to gather more and more data, I just want people to play whatever they feel like playing. And that's actually what I've told a lot of my friends lately, who some of them are pretty high elo gamers. Like some of them are people that have like, been near the top 1000 in Dota or even just like
Yeah,
semi-professional
yeah.
Counter-Strike people. And I'm just like, guys, like, whatever you want to do, just play it because by next week, this hero is going to change in some way or another, anyways. And all the skills you're getting with the hero you like to play more may become more valid because they're probably going to buff that hero if it's tuned or undertuned, or they might even nerf a hero you like, unfortunately, if you and other people are just winning with them too much. So it's just like a game
Yeah.
that I feel like people, even though there is going to be a competitive side of this, there's going to be an esport, overly investing your time into like what is the most meta today is probably sort of a futile exercise.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, like seeing a lot of like the pro players from other games, right? Like people I've seen from Overwatch, people I've seen from Valorant and stuff that have sort of come over to the game and how they all have like different approaches to learning it. You look at somebody like Vegas, right, who just plays everything. Like he doesn't want to, has a main, I suppose, of Viscous, but he will play every character and he'll just go, okay, I'm going to spend like 3 days just playing Bebop. I'm going
Hmm.
to go play something else. And then you've got players that will just like one trick a character almost like Mikhail, like just 1,600 games on Paradox of all
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah.
it's like Paradox, Vindictor, maybe like Pocket and stuff, and
Yeah. Yeah.
Shiv.
That sounds
And then
right.
it's just small little dots where there's other characters and some characters that he's never even played, which is crazy considering the amount of games that he's got in. So it is cool to see like how high elo players have like adjusted, whether they just go across the board and go wide with their agent pool, which I think is going to be really important if they actually want to get picked up by an org eventually, versus those that kind of want to be the one trick, well known pocket player or lash player, right? Really popular thing in stuff like Valorant, right? Where it was like Silver one tricks like Average Jonas that was really well known for his lineups and stuff. Like how people are trying to approach sort of making it in this game, whichever direction you want to kind of go in. It's interesting for sure.
Right. So I'm curious about, and I'm sure viewers and listeners would be interested in just finding out like what sort of involvement. Well, actually, let's go back just a little bit first. So, what is your sort of esports experience? I talked about the fact that you work some Valorant Champions events, but like how deep were you in that scene? And this is just so people know who you are.
Yeah, so initially I came from Overwatch. When that came out, me and my friend Miska like wanted to make content on something. We didn't really know what, and obviously Overwatch was the exciting thing. We basically only did it to try and get in the playtest when it was a closed beta back then. But it sort of went from this project to like being the full-time job that it's like the 10-year anniversary of next year. So it
Oh
like
wow,
time has passed
nice.
by and it makes me feel really old. Um but I remember around that time that people like Mitch, like Uber, was starting to do stuff with ESL and Jay Kaplan. They were like doing like a ESL adjacent Overwatch channel, like show, like talking about the game. Eventually, they would sort of do some tournaments over there, and that'd be the channel for. I think it was called like Overdrive or something. And so, whilst we were doing YouTube, we kind of got to see the likes of Uber go from being working for ESL on these like community cups almost to being in the Overwatch League and being like an accoladed play-by-play caster, seeing Sideshow and Bren sort of come up from doing the Insomnia like lands and stuff in the UK to then the Overwatch League, and then obviously like in Valorant. So I think when Valorant was coming out, we wanted to make that shift over because we didn't know what was happening with Overwatch 2, right? Like it was just a little bit of a limbo. So Valorant came out at a really good time, and I made like the conscious effort of like I want to get more involved in esports because I actually have like a bit of a background in like sports broadcasting, like football commentating
Oh.
for like Hull City, which is the team that like I support, like for their like DVD match things. So
Mm-hmm.
like I was always sort of interested in like sports broadcasts. So I kind of wanted to get into doing esports and kind of did what a lot of the casters in Deadlock are doing now, where it's like, you know, volunteering for the community cups, getting reps, getting some experience on like uh tournament organized things as it gets bigger. And then that just sort of led from me working in EMEA mostly and then doing champions a couple of times. It's only just since the leagues in Valorant have sort of become more franchised, that a lot of the opportunities have dried up because a lot of people have like moved over to Berlin to work from there. There's only so many opportunities, right? So I've been sort of trying to get the reps in and sort of earn my space back to an extent, but and it's still something I'm keen to do. I've been following a lot of like the Chinese scene in Valorant this year because there hasn't been an English stream, so I've just been watch
Mm.
partying it. And I know that this is like a CS channel, but honestly, Chinese Valorant is the most batshit insane thing that you could watch. They're just mechanical gods, but sometimes they just don't have the brains, which has been
That's the
hilarious
same as
this
Counter
year.
Strike. That's like the same. That's what we've loved about
Yeah.
Counter Strike CS, where it's just or Chinese CS, where it's like you get these mechanically brilliant people that can just get multi frags you don't think are possible, but they're just putting themselves in dumb positions a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's the whole like I think in any tax shooter, right? It's when you're in that like analyst coach position, you need to sort of read of like this was a good idea, but it just didn't go well for whatever reason, like poorly executed, or somebody just
Can't take
clutched,
care of
or somebody
themselves.
whiffed, right? Versus bad ideas that even if you win those rounds, you're kind of going, yeah, don't do that too often. That was like a terrible thing. Whereas I think that China is just, they're all bad ideas, but they don't go, there's something wrong with our strategy. They go, I need to spend the next 3 days in death matches and aim
Yes.
lab to then just like, I need to hit those shots. So now that the macros got a lot better, they're also mechanically winning fights. And now those like crazy Chinese teams have gone on to win champs this year. So it's just this
Oh,
whole
yeah.
like, it's crazy that Valorant is a very like international sport, right? It's not just Europe or North America. Like you have teams in Korea and stuff looking really strong. China now. And so yeah, I was watch partying a lot of that this year. But like with Deadlock coming out, it's the off season. I felt like it was just sort of worth a punt because I wanted to go into playing the game and like, let's see what it's like. I don't want to make any judgments. I don't want to put too much stock on this game, like being the next step. But yeah, it's very addicting to play, but it's a really fun game to learn. And I think everybody that plays Dota has said the same thing of like, you've got into that habit that you keep wanting to go back in to improve and incrementally get better and learn more. And that's like what kept people playing Dota for however long. So the fact that Deadlock has that, but it also has the shooter elements that I like from Overwatch and Valorant to a certain extent.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's been a really fun game to learn and adjust to.
It's easily been the most captivating game for me since really I originally got into Dota, actually. Like, I mean, because I played
Mhm.
Counter-Strike before Dota, and I gave Valorant a chance, and I gave Overwatch a shot. I tried, I was actually, I casted some like really low division Overwatch stuff pretty early on, as that game was becoming an esport as well. And
Did you do some Valorant in the early days as
yeah,
well? Like some
yeah.
of the Ignition
It,
events, I remember.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, I did some Ignition series stuff early on. Didn't really do much after that. Kind of like kept the option open. In fact, I even had a slight correspondence with the people hiring at Riot, but then I just didn't want to. I just want to jump feet first into it. Like I didn't want to fully commit. Like I liked Counter Strike. I was getting hired for Counter Strike, and if I did stuff with Riot, I'd have to do stuff. I think full time with Riot. I don't think there was really a. You can do some CS events in the year and some Riot events. It was like if you're picking Valorant, you're picking Valorant. And I just
Yeah.
couldn't do that. So
There's almost that element that Riot would want to entice you to fully move over as well. So it's
yeah,
and that's the thing I guess with like working in, if Deadlock scene grows, that's the positive side because like for me, because it's just all Riot controlled for the most part, if Riot EMEA don't really want to hire me, there's no other TO realistically to
right.
work for. Like I could go and do like Pacific, but I'd have to move to Korea, I'd have to move to Seoul, which is something a bit of a bridge too
It's
far, right?
yeah, yeah,
Whereas, like, say if it was CS and like Blast didn't weren't interested in, there's maybe a chance with like other TOs that are
yep.
in the space of like various sizes. So it's not like the door is shut on you completely. It's a bit like we'll just sort of see. Like, and I guess that's kind of what I like about CS events as well. Like, because you have different talent, you do get very different vibes and stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
was like always a good way to sort of look at it for me of like how Blast approaches their desk in comparison to like ESL and stuff, for example.
Right, right. And it feels like with the way that the Deadlock space is shaping, it's that I've got no indication that it's gonna just like that would be such a huge shift from what Valve did with Dota, Valve did with Counter-Strike, just flat out at this point. They're not a publisher that's going to just say this is how the esports scene must be run. They're going to let other tournament organizers, ESL, Blast, PGL, what have you, all of them are going to take their crack at it. If they like running the events, which I think they probably will, then they'll probably do more. Like, for example, PGL is a little smaller in CS, but it's bigger in Dota. So they'll
For
probably,
sure, yeah.
they'll choose which tournaments or which games they actually want to do. And I assume the same thing with Blast. Blast has done stuff with Fortnite, Rainbow Six, Counter Strike, of course. They're doing stuff with Dota actually later this year. So any esport that really has an open circuit of TOs that can get in and get out, then and they're not really like signing a huge contract with the publisher. I think these kind of TOs like how Valve operates right now. And that's why it's even cool to see that there's like these small tournaments coming up. That the fact that Aurora Masters came out pretty early on, the fact that
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
these showdown events that are happening, which are smaller tier, but like still showing what it is at kind of like the high level right now in terms of the space. And I think it's just a good blueprint for how a space should be run, as opposed to just like with Riot. I just think it's just a little too constricting, personally.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like good sides to both. Like the thing I like about Deadlock is just that there has been zero marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Like Valve have not even like breathed its name. It feels like they're
No,
just like,
no.
hey, you want to play this game? You got to get a friend to invite you. Which like they don't even need to do that anymore. But it's still like, we'll just let people trickle in. If they want to play it, they'll find a way. Just go on the subreddit and just get somebody to
Yeah,
invite you
yeah,
there, right? But it's like there definitely is an element of how this game wants to approach an audience because there's already
yeah.
been like reports and stuff for MOBAs that new player acquisition is horrible for both Dota and League of Legends. It's getting harder and harder year on year to get people interested in playing MOBAs because they're not the wave anymore, right? There's so many other games that, at least with like, CS and like Valorant seems and tries to set itself up as very like it's very easy to pick up and play.
Yes,
There's
yes.
loads of abilities. It's super complicated, but it's not that bad. Just like dip your toe in and you'll get to grips with it quickly. CS is sort of the same, but I think CS, much like other Valve games, including Deadlock and Dota, is very like it seems straightforward, but there's a lot of small things and little like mechanics checks that you need to be able to do. And that's what separates good players from great, because if you don't get used to like sliding in Deadlock or warding in the right places and denying creeps in both Dota and Deadlock, you're going to have a really horrible time and people are going to call you out on it. So like I do like the approach that Riot has when like Valorant was first announced, that it's like it's 108 128 tick servers
Oh yeah.
with a big focus on anti-cheat,
Yep.
which feels very like looking at you, Counter
Yes,
Strike, we're
exactly.
doing this. But like they didn't even mention it was like a hero shooter, or that there was like recon darts and trips and cameras and resurrects, right? Because people had started to panic about that. But they were like, this is our core thing that we're working on. And it was the same with 2XKO, that they were like, this is a fighting game for fighting game players. This isn't some like Heroes of the Storm MOBA where it's super easy, anybody can
Hmm.
pick it up. Like, no, this is for the hardcore people. Like, that's our audience, that's our focus. And so I just kind of almost wish that Valve would do that in the future, of just be like, this is what like our vision is of the game, how we want it to be approached. But I also kind of like that they're just like, is the game fun? If you like it, keep playing it. We'll keep editing it. We'll keep adjusting. And there's almost that like not a big focus on the whole statement of the game. It's just,
Yeah.
is the game fun? Okay, cool. We'll keep making it as fun as it can be.
Valve make great products, but they don't always invest the most time into making their marketing team work that hard, or even if they have one. Like
Yeah,
every
they don't need to market anything
no,
anymore from the sounds of it.
no, they just the most they ever seem to do is that they're like, hey, wouldn't it be good if we had Counter Strike in Asia? Okay, let's just give that to Perfect World. I don't know if you know how that operates. It's almost like a white label that operates all Counter Strike stuff in in Asia or in
Mhm.
China, and it's just like they're pretty hands off with it. And that's why if you actually go on Perfect World servers with a VPN, you can use different skins that are actually not even in the Counter Strike marketplace in general. It's like Perfect
Right.
World has their own sort of marketplace for like anime skins that you can just put on your character. And it's like if people from the West saw this, they'd be like, what the hell is going on with this game over here? But I've jumped around these servers before, and I'm like, this is just like people are role playing in Counter Strike in a server, and this is just not a thing at all. But Valve just lets that happen. They're just very hands off. I want to bring this back to some topics that the community has kind of been more interested in lately, and that's like the
Yeah.
esports discussion of this game and the future of it, because I think that's kind of where the jury is still out. People know it's fun. People are having a good time with it. They're updating it. It feels like they're doing a lot to make sure that balance is good. What have you? They're even doing stuff with the anti-cheat to make people turn into a. You can turn people into a frog if they're hacking in your game. You know, like
Yeah.
they're trying to be vocal about we're handling some of the stuff we didn't do in CS and we're doing it a little bit better. But I still think the question remains: is this as an esport? What do you see it as for the future in terms of watchability or retention?
Yeah, I mean, that side of it's tricky because it's just not going to be a priority for Valve anytime soon. Like the observing UI and stuff is clunky as hell, right? You've got Source TV attached to it too, which is great. Like I come from a game with no replays at all that people are still crying about and want. So going into a playtest of a game that has just replays off the rip is really nice. The fact that I could just go and watch like the tournament from this
No, wait,
week
does Valorant
from their
still?
POV.
Does Valorant
No
still?
replay system, no.
Wait, still? Okay.
But to be fair, like it's
Okay.
like for Valve again, Valve have a lot of money. They have Steam.
Yeah,
They're
yeah, yeah.
set. But I think for Riot, it is a case like I understand why they wouldn't have it because it wasn't prioritized, but also like realistically, it's a free to play game. Is it like resource intensive? Yes. Not only just actually going into the game in order to do it, but storing a lot of those replays on their
Yeah.
side. They can't make money off it. And it's easy for a vocal part of the audience, including myself, right, to be like, we really want replays. But am I going to use it every single day and make it more worthwhile? Probably not.
Okay.
Are people going to start buying skins more because they get replays? Probably not. Like, I understand it sounds, Riot want to do it, but I fully get why it's not a top priority and hasn't been a top priority for them. Whereas with Deadlock, because it's on Source, it's a little bit easier, I suppose, to be like copy and paste it over. But yeah, like the whole coming from Overwatch, where the biggest complaint was being able to watch the game and understand what the hell was going on, Deadlock does suffer from that a little bit more too. But it's tricky, right? Because I think one of the issues is because the map's like asymmetrical, well, it's symmetrical, mirrored. It's kind of like this,
Yeah, it's like a
like
diagonal mirror.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the issue is like it's very hard to know which side of the map that you're facing, or even if you're watching like a
Yeah.
Amber Hand or Sapphire Flame player. Usually, it's just like their health bar that kind of gives it away. But for me, I'm like watching it, and I'm like, is this just because the observing side of this is not great? It's hard to know where you are on the map, which way you're facing, so you just kind of get a bit lost on which POV you're watching. Or is it just that like you have to get used to it a little bit more? Like if I was trying to observe a game of Valorant in the early days, I wouldn't know where the hell I was either.
Yeah.
But obviously now it's a lot easier to understand where parts on the map are. So, and it's also just like I guess like the MOBA side of it too, where I'm used to looking at the minimap in the top left hand corner, probably same as you, but having the
Yeah.
minimap at the bottom right where
Yeah.
it is for League, and I think Dota might be bottom left.
I think Dota's bottom left. I just know it's the opposite of League. Yeah, one of its
Yeah.
bottom left or bottom right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm used to it
So
being in the top left for Counter Strike though, for example.
yeah, and it's hard to sort of build up that muscle memory almost of like, okay, what am I looking at? Looking at the mini map. Okay, I want to look. I'm just constantly like, what am I looking at? I try to work out
Hmm.
like every single time. And so yeah, that could be the thing from like an esports side that really screws the game over. It's just it could be really difficult to watch. You've got the casual clip of him talking about Valorant times 20 of like this guy's turned into a bird, he's flying
Yeah.
across the map, he's hit people, he's done no damage.
Yeah.
It's just it's going to be one of those kind of things. Like I definitely recommend people to try and watch some of the like esports tournament, like the grand finals from yesterday, or like the downtown showdown thing, and just see if it's watchable for people because it's hard for me, and I've got like 500 hours in the game now. Never mind for somebody that's like brand new to be able to come in and be like, what the hell is going on? So it's not only just getting new players to play the game, but it's also getting new players to watch it and understand what the hell is going on. But yeah, people keep asking me like what it's going like how big of an esport is it going to be? And I think the answer is like I think it'll do well. I don't think it's going to be like an S tier esport. I don't
Right.
think it's going to be really challenging like CS or League or Valorant or Dota. Like potentially, it's hard to know. Like you've got a good amount of concurrent players in the game. The other side of it is that Valve have made no money off the game as of yet, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Like there's
Yeah,
nothing to
yeah.
buy in the game, so
Yeah, yeah, true.
um, so it is a bit like it's popular, but is that side of it going to be popular too? Like viewership on the tournaments has been good, but yeah, like it's gonna be interesting to see how it like moves forward, and I think it'll do well. The problem I have is that it's gonna have the esports hand forced a bit too early. That there's
Mm.
already tournaments with like 10k prize pools, which is ridiculous when you've had tournaments decided by a coin flip because the servers kept
Yep.
dying,
Yep.
right? Like
I heard about that,
you
yeah.
can't be having at least it's a lot better now, but you have got tournaments happening 2 days after a fairly big patch. But from what I know from Dota people, they're like, yeah, that is normal.
Yeah,
That is
it
they will
is.
literally have majors on a new patch and just be like, deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
which is both exciting and terrifying. Again, coming from a game like Valorant, which is very like like you have to wait 2 weeks before a new agent comes out to be in a tournament, 4 weeks for a new map, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they'll play on the tournament client on old patches if it sort of clashes. So yeah, going from that into just this Wild West is really interesting, but it like especially with like some of the builds and stuff we saw this weekend with like I said, the Ivy build where you have the big kudzu bombs and her ultimate bomb radius is a quarter of the map. Like literally no joke, it's ridiculous. So but again, that's kind of the fun when it's a playtest and you don't have too much money on the line either.
Right. Yeah. It's also, I mean, I think people are making some observations on these early tournaments, like who are some of the teams that are consistently placing well or at least competing in them. But I think that the game's gonna have to reach a more stable state before too many big signings are had. But actually, I wanted to even pivot to that. Like, so there have been a couple orgs that are sort of poking and prodding in this space, but I don't think I haven't seen anything that was too big in terms of signings. But I don't have you caught too many things. Like I know BetBoom has done some signings. Heroic are like looking at orgs. I think Liquid are actually they might even know who their coach is already for their team. But I'm not. What have you gathered in terms of like orgs diving into this space?
Yeah, I think it sort of depends on the org really. Like I could definitely see like a Team Liquid getting involved. Just those kind of orgs that just have a team in everything that they
Mm-hmm.
can sort of put their feelers out. Um, I'd say for Heroic, they have like a Valorant Twitter account as well, but they never had a Valorant team other than like a Game Changer squad.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's they know how to farm the impressions, and I think it was a smart thing for them to do.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's like I think Aurora might have a team like they did the tournament, like Sunset and stuff for on a squad at the moment. The only other one is Nouns, which
Mm.
didn't they signed a team, but it's literally as a for free thing. I think the players just get like merch and like
Oh.
peripherals and upgrades and stuff, and it's just a name thing, which kind of sort of sums up like no disrespect to the players at all. Like I think if people are happy to make that decision, then go for it. But it is just like it sort of highlights how early it is that nobody is going to commit at this point because we don't know when the game is going to be coming out of even this sort of playtest period. Is there going to be a closed open beta? Are we even technically in alpha right now? It could be the game could come out at the end of the year, it could come out next year, it could come out the year after. We literally have no idea because Valve probably don't have a clue themselves, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
characters that are in the game that haven't been like released yet that you can just go and play like in like practice ranges and stuff too. So there's a lot still to come with the game. It definitely doesn't feel as ready as it could be. Um, but yeah, I think it is just a lot of orgs are like, we're looking and we're keeping an eye on it. And like I guess like agencies on either side sort of looking at players to potentially pick up because for somebody like Mikhail, he is absolutely worth picking up from an org
Yeah.
like a Liquid or Fnatic or a G2 or whoever because at least he's a big content creator in the space up until the point where they're playing in tournaments and he's also playing in a consistent team as well with like Piggy and Zergy that were on the channel.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I'd love to see Mikhail being picked up by an OG, even if it isn't necessarily with the rest of a team,
Mm-hmm.
just to get him under your flyer to make a team when the esports scene is a bit more ready
Yeah.
and just kind of go from that. G2 did something similar, I think, when Valorant came out. Like they sort of signed Mixwell and then put the rest of the team together bit by bit.
Right.
And obviously with Tens and Cloud9 and Brax for T1, like I think doing that with players like Mikhail and probably like Lefa hydration in NA. Just start with hiring one player to your team, but they're pretty much a pseudo content creator
Yes.
until tournaments are ready to go. Because you don't want to sign to an org and play in 2.5k tournament prize pools and then not win. Because then it's like,
Yeah.
doesn't really set a good precedent.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think most people that are probably listening to this know Mikhail at this point, but I think that you're spot on with the fact that like if even if they sign him and for whatever reason like people find out his paradox isn't that good, even though it is like I see it,
Yeah.
he's really good with it. It's just he can just be a streamer at this point because every single day I see he's topping the chart on Twitch for the game.
Yeah.
So it's pretty unlikely that one, it's pretty unlikely that he wouldn't be a competitive player, but two, it seems like he's already developing himself to be a big enough personality. And he's not like the most interactive streamer or anything like that. Like he's just really good at the game. He does answer a couple questions here and there, and that's kind of all people want. They want a person they trust to be high elo, to be a voice for the team. And I haven't heard anything too much either. But okay, one more question about the esports side. I wanted to just know your general thoughts on this. Like, observing is gonna be awkward in this game. You've done stuff with Overwatch. I think the worst meta was the one where it was like, shit, I forgot the abbreviation, but the one where it was like double tank. That was just goats meta. The goats meta. That's when I actually just flat out stopped watching. I just stopped watching. Triple tank. Yeah, I just stopped watching entirely at that point. I was like, this game is not entertaining for me anymore. Do you think there's any what do you think the lessons are from that time of Overwatch that you can be applied to Deadlock? Like how can we prevent something like that from happening again?
Yeah, I think the problem with goats wasn't even so much the observing side of it. It was how it broke like the society of Overwatch. Because you'd go into like gold games and people were like, we need to play goats.
Yeah.
And it's like, do we though? Like, because there is that trickle down mechanic with anything, right? Like, this is where you might want to position when you're playing, watching an Elmer Putty video from like 5 years ago about where to position on Infernus, right? And it's like, why are you playing here? You should be here. Like,
yeah.
But having that in Overwatch was kind of bad because if you just wanted to just chill and play whatever characters you wanted, you were holding the game hostage. And so it was a little bit of a frustrating period for anybody to play because if you were somewhat decent at the game, you were expected to play this comp that nobody really wanted to play. And so there have already been instances of this happening in Deadlock, like notably the double soaking where you start in one lane, soak that wave, and then move to another one. And so you basically just do this on like fast characters like Lash and Pocket. Mirage would be horrendous at that if he came into the game whilst that's still going on. I mean, technically it is, but the quick response in just like, all right, we're going to put these like temporary solutions in up until the next big patch where we're just going to make the map bigger. And now you can double soak if you want to make that your strategy, but there's a huge amount of diminishing returns in order to do it. So there's going to be other instances of that, right? Where somebody works out like the Ivy build. If that's super strong, there's going to be people that will take it and try and play it themselves. But at the same time, that is just one character out of 6. It's when you get into these positions where everybody has to be on board with a strategy or a comp. And if they're not, they lose and the other team has a notable advantage over you. That's where it kills games like Overwatch and the like. And even Valorant to an extent, right? When there's a chamber meta and stuff, when there's like Viper metas and just obvious this character is stronger than this one, you're trolling if you don't pick it.
Yeah.
It always just ruins the experience for people who just want to play what's fun for them or push the limits and try and find a counter to it. So yeah, like that's always a risk with Deadlock, but we've already seen like Valve be very quick to be like, we're aware that this kind of stuff is happening, we're going to shut it down almost instantly.
I guess the equivalent for my viewers would be just in the Counter-Strike meta when a gun is perceived as just way too strong for its cost generally. Like we had an AUG meta, we had a Krieg meta.
Yeah, I was going to say AUG.
Yeah, those were probably the worst times in the game for a lot of people because it felt like the hip shooter style of just like running and gunning was sort of taken away because even a guy with a rifle that costs $50 to $100 more than the other one could just lock down angles in ways that just felt way too strong. So that's kind of, I guess, happening with the 5.7 a little bit right now, but either way, it's not too important. I think like a Dota comparison would maybe even be more apt where I get what you're saying, but I think one thing was good about Dota in the playing experience is that, yeah, people would at like the higher level brackets say like, why are you not doing this? You're trolling. It would get kind of toxic, but it was more like, why are you not using this one build and why are you using this other build? And that's also probably kind of true with Deadlock, but I feel like people are still in a period of experimentation that my pugs have been like gotten lightly toxic, but I just usually queue with at least 2 friends all the time. So
Yeah.
I don't experience that as much, but I guess it could happen in the solo queue environment for sure. If you start running
Yeah.
into people that are just way too just in tune with the pro meta despite not playing at it, it's kind of it just feels like it makes things toxic. There's no better way for me to
Yeah.
describe it. It's just toxic.
The morning games in Europe are certainly something because a lot like I think it's a lot of the main like Russian like Zanaya, Sunset. A lot of people that were in that first Aurora tournament, I think they stream a lot more on the European servers as opposed to the Russian ones. So
Mm.
a lot, I feel like a lot of the Russian players have moved away from the Russian servers because
Oh,
they are potentially horrible or they just want to go where
okay.
like the bigger streamers are going. But now it is just like a lot of toxicity just from various people. People don't talk unless they're calling somebody else a slur, and then you're just like, well, all right, let's just keep trying to crack on as much as possible.
Okay.
But yeah, like it almost feels like you've got the worst sides of like tack shooter, hero shooter, and MOBA,
Yeah.
do like just all
Sorts of
in one melting pot.
mentalities. Yeah.
One of my friends said like this game is going to be amazing until it comes out, and then it's going to be the most obnoxious audience of people known to man.
I
And
think
it's like I'm
so.
so scared of it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit scared it's gonna start becoming that kind of like the MOBA mentality of like just why are you not itemizing like this? And then I've even tried to just give general advice in like the most passive, like not passive aggressive, but like most calm way. I've really tried, and then and like I was like, hey, if you're playing Wraith, maybe you don't need to do the earn when you have a full lane right there. Like probably just shoot the creep. You know, we need to push that wave out anyways.
Yeah, yeah.
And then his buddy just came and just started swearing at me like crazy, and I'm like, okay, it's already giving like maybe I shouldn't give anybody advice at all, but when my base is getting pushed, I felt it was a relevant comment. But at the same time, yeah, I like you have to tread so lightly in MOBA spaces because people get so emotionally invested, and that's like I think that's one thing that I've actually liked about Counter Strike as a even solo queue experience. Usually, you can just kind of do your own thing. You can almost carry from every single position if you're good enough, and all you
Yeah.
really need is your teammates to tell you what they know, like a little bit of like there's one B, there's one A, there's three mid. Like, okay, cool. I don't need you guys to say anything else because I can just take in that information. As opposed to if one of your there's something that just comes out of you if you're a mobile player and you see this guy go for the worst itemization possible and you're just you're just like you're just fuming. It's like
Yeah.
why did my Infernus not buy Unstoppable? Like why did you not buy Unstoppable when they have these characters on the other team? Either way, this is turning into like petty grievances of matchmaking
Yeah, yeah.
experience.
I
I,
will say there is
yeah.
really good advice to that, just for other people. That like the best thing is just like the best way to making sure that you don't get into shit with somebody else is just keep saying what you're doing. Just call
Okay.
intention. Like I'm gonna push it. Like because I would play like a lot of Dynamo, and everybody would be like, "Why are you not with us ulting?" And
Oh.
I'm like, "Well, I don't have my ult anyway. I'm not just going to. I'm not playing Mercy in Overwatch. I'm not just going to follow people around and then ult." So just
Yeah.
being able to be like, all right, I'm going to push yellow. I'm going to clear these camps. Because if they really need me, they'll just go, no, 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 let's go. Like they will start going, let's go
Yeah.
green. Let's make a play with your ult. Otherwise, if I go yellow and everybody goes green and just ARAMs, which green is always the fucking lane that people just ARAM on, like I swear, like you're trying to just push objectives and there's just a 3v3 happening when you're 20k souls down over and over again. But yeah, like it is one of those ones that people can't be like, why are you not here? And I'm like, well, I just said I was doing this. Like
Right.
it's such a good get out of jail free card because it's like you don't need to tell them what to do. They're not telling you what to do. But also when you start doing it and it starts going well, other people start doing it as well. They don't even realize it. They just start calling more, which it's like getting blood out of a stone in Europe trying to get people to talk. But
Yeah.
once people start doing it, the game becomes so much easier. And there's so
Of
many
course.
characters that require that coordination. Otherwise, Mo and Krill just goes around unrelenting because he's just catching people one at a time,
Yeah.
like some serial killer.
Okay, I wanted to let's move into some of the patch notes. Okay, so
Hmm.
there was a very big patch that released on Thursday. Feels like this is going to be a pretty regular thing for the Deadlock side, the Deadlock community. Is it always a Thursday patch? Actually, first of all,
I think so, yeah. It
okay,
used to be sort of like 10, 11 o'clock my time. So
yeah,
yeah, like 3, 4 hours from now, but now it's got to like 2 a.m. my time. So I just mostly like go, right, I'm off to bed. I'll wake up and have
see it,
the community everything on fire meme when I like wake up to see what the hell's going on.
yeah.
But yeah,
The-
it's got later and it's usually a Thursday every other week. Yeah.
Okay, so first thing that we could have probably even opened the show with this. I feel like it's the most interesting topic is just Mirage as a character has
Mhm.
been introduced, and what's your first take on what this character is?
So, oh yeah, that's the other side, right? So, one of the things I wanted to do with like potentially doing broadcast stuff is what I wish I did in Valorant early is like get involved with a team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I got asked to be an assistant coach very early on in the Valorant days, but because I was doing YouTube at the same time, I said no. Really wish I didn't because that would have been a huge amount of experience and I would have learned a lot. So one thing I've tried to do is just like even just shadow teams, being like, hey, I want to see how like coordinated players on actual like high low players that are playing in some of these North American tournaments. So I'm not gonna say that I'm coaching because that feels like the whole top 0.01% streamer titles and clickbait on YouTube and stuff. So, but like I'm helping a lot with the team and like learning characters and odd reviewing some of the stuff, right? But yeah, like TF2 Boomers team. The reason why I mention that now is because we focused a lot on playing Mirage early in this tournament. Because we just felt like it was such a strong character that most people would either ignore because they don't want to deal with it because it's 2 days in advance of the tournament, or they just don't think he'd be very good outright.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
let me even give you a shout out here because I feel like you're being really humble about your involvement there because people you don't want to say like you're too big for what is actually happening, which is that this is a small tournament, it's new in the game, but your team with TF2 Boomers that you worked with actually made it out of the group stage and made it to the playoffs of the last what is it downtown showdown event.
yeah.
So and that had some teams from both Europe and North America competing. So that is a pretty legitimate claim that you're working with one of. I'm not gonna say go out and say like this is a top 4 team in the world or top 6 just because you came in that place in the tournament,
Mhm.
but you're definitely one of the people that are obviously playing the game at a higher level or at least observing and talking about the game at a higher level. That's your
Yeah, like
yeah.
there's definitely like a community of the teams in North America that just scrim a lot. Like Cat Girls' team, really knowledgeable player on stuff like Ivy and stuff when the game was like in its closed off state. Really good team. I think they were the ones that sort of came up with the double soaking thing anyway. So like a lot of teams are really good at innovating. Obviously, like you've got the Cabal, which is now kind of two teams. You've got the Cabal and then this Mojang and Krill, which is Mahjong and Krill, sorry,
Mahjong,
which is
yeah.
like yeah, which is like Hydration's team. He used to be in the Overwatch League and stuff. Players like Leffer, some Chovies, which I think is from League, but I don't know for certain. I recognize the name.
Mhm.
And yeah, just they won the tournament. They won the last two North American tournaments, but we scrim them. We scrim the Cabal. We scrim Cat Girls' team. We scrim Nouns, and we're scrimming Nouns tonight as well. Like, so there are like half a dozen more teams every week that were like consistently like scrimming, but it's not as if like we're hiding strats and stuff. Like a lot of the players will just stream their POV
Yeah.
and like you can hear us all talking about the draft and stuff like that. And like nobody's hiding anything for a 2.5k tournament. I guess we just kind of want to be like let people learn about the game. And if you're interested in seeing how coordinated play is, like that's our in to show it, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, like we're a decent team, I'd say for sure. Like a lot of room to improve, but that's the case for literally everybody. But yeah, like I think it's just I don't want to really say that I'm coaching because I'm more learning from the players than they're learning from me, right? But
Mhm.
I'm just like an extra pair of eyes that can help somebody learn Yamato or get the most out of playing Haze and stuff, for example. It's
Mhm.
and then just any odd reviewing little clips that I can do for them. That's just so I get into the habit of like learning and thinking about the game more. Because I think as broadcast talent, it's very easy to just sit back and react to everything that's happening in front of you instead of thinking about the game in your own head and trying to theory craft it in your own head.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, 100%. I just quickly before we get into it, like that's kind of the difference between what makes someone like I like that you say reactive because if you are just a reactive caster or a reactive analyst, like that probably means you don't even have your own founded principles of like what makes a play a good play. What is your what would
Yeah.
you implement as a strategy for a team? But once you start to outline that, then you start to say, okay, I like when there's 3-man playmaking, and I think I like when there's like a one player that's always trying to farm away from the team until he hits like 25k souls. You kind of have these like little benchmarks in your head that you can adjust, but if you've never come up with them, unfortunately unfortunately on broadcast, you're gonna just kind of sound like a prick. You're just gonna be like really critical most of the time and be like, oh,
You're
they
gonna
didn't
sound
do
like
this.
Reddit. You just sound like
Yeah.
Reddit. You just sort of parrot over people's opinions and go, "Yeah, well, I think that this player should be dropped because he's got like it's just scoreboard Steven stats, right?
Yes.
Bottom of the kill feed, like bad HLTV rating, get him off the team." And it's like it doesn't work like that. You don't know the vibes of these like players and what they bring to the table.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you have to you got to do a little bit. You always have to do a little bit of assuming when you're on a broadcast or even making a statement on a podcast, but like about a team. But like if you've never even tried to outline what it is you're about, then you're just a React Andy, and nobody wants that. So with your guys and the work that you've put in with Mirage, how are you now perceiving him? Because yeah, you guys are using him, right?
Yeah, so I think naturally when you have an ultimate that allows you to teleport to an enemy or a teammate, it's going to be insane for coordinated play
Yeah.
because like the macro side of the game is where teams are either excelling or struggling. And I'd say that we're like more on the struggling side of just how do we react to certain situations? Like that's difficult when it's like you're still learning the game when you're getting used to all of these interactions, but I guess you have to have those core principles of all right, we have one walker left alive, they're going to fight for it, we're going to sort of play to get information of okay, there's three that are going to push this walker to get it. We're going to push the other side of the map and try to get two walkers in at a time. And just being able to go over like I have no MOBA background. I'm like level 8 in League of Legends. I think I have 12 hours in Dota, right? Like it's not a lot, but like that's been part of the fun of learning stuff about tempo. Like, okay, we got 3 kills against them. We now have a window to do something. If we go and take a walker, we need to like there's a bad problem I suppose of like taking a walker but then maybe like the paradox catches another one of their players and we try and fight them more but people are coming back off of respawn, we're fighting not for an objective, we're fighting on their side of the map, we get stuck, we die. That advantage and tempo that we created for ourselves and a 5k soul lead has now become a 15k soul deficit when we've just achieved something, when we just killed them, got a walker, right? Like that's a common thing that like happens. And you know, people that will play thousands of hours of Dota and League of Legends will be like, yeah, no shit, you know. But this game, when you have such a background of different people, including myself, that don't
It's
have that MOBA experience, you kind of have to learn by doing.
it's important to like the MOBA fundamentals that people have from Dota and League and can take over. They might understand a macro aspect a little bit better, but then that's why the game's appealing because those guys can't at least the way that FPS players probably think is like that guy can't hold his mouse. Like he's used to right clicking a target and we're used to having to headshot
Yeah,
somebody
yeah,
like tracking them and stuff like so the differences are made up in like micro versus macro where the MOBA people are coming in with that background versus TAC FPS or any arena shooter are coming in with this background, and so it meets in the middle, which is why the game is a lot of fun and has so much to take. Like you're always learning something because nobody was just a god at both games.
yeah. So going back onto Mirage, like having a character that can play and farm on one side of the map and then instantly TP to be a part of a team fight.
Yeah.
Whereas that bad positioning, if you're doing that on like Infernus, you're gonna get like called out and collared for the fact that you were not in a position to go help your team when they were looking to potentially fight, right? So Mirage being able to do that on a pretty low cooldown is good. His tornadoes are crazy. It's
Yeah.
basically rifle that you can get frequently. You echo shard that bad boy, and it's really good movement across the map. But yeah, like I said, like really good CC to just take multiple people out the fight. But even stuff like his like scarabs, the little things that he throws out, and like life steals, you have to throw. You can only throw one at one target. You have to
Mhm.
throw them at multiple people, and you only have a certain window that you can throw them. If you throw one and that window closes, you have to wait 30 seconds. But you can also throw out like 5 in that window. And so it's trying to get the most out of that. That's pretty good. But also like his passive where as you shoot them, it does like spirit damage on a like multiplier. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize how strong that is.
Oh, it's so
Like even
so
against
so crazy.
like characters like I was soloing in against the Shiv earlier, and the amount
Oh
of
my
times that like
god.
we'd fight, and like as a character that would defer a lot of his like damage, he would still just like run away and be like, haha, I got out of there, and then just bam, dead. And it's
Yeah.
crazy that you're like not one shotting, but you're just bursting down
A
a
shiv.
Shiv of all people.
Oh, I played
So
I played a game when I was Shiv against Mirage, and I had just played 3 Mirage games in a row, and I didn't real like I was like, oh, I'm such a good laner, but then I was on the other side of it as Shiv, and at first I was like, oh my god, I'm just dying. Like I can't trade with this guy at all. If you trade, you're behind. Even
Mhm.
like hitting a dagger on him, like the Djin's mark is just so powerful against Shiv, who also has such low base HP, and it's just like it just hits you in a burst. Also, so
Yeah.
he can just kill you. I found like the hardest opponents are basically once what I learned was that you have to build basically like more max HP items against this guy, or you need spirit resist, and you don't really want to buy that too early. Usually, like most of the vitality items on the 500 soul count are more about like just increasing your total health. Like I didn't really care
Yeah.
about regen. I just wanted to be beefier. Like the beefier you
Yeah.
are, the harder it is for Mirage early on, at least.
Yeah, that's the other thing that's sort of happening with this patch overall. I think even Valve said as much. Like overall, there's less spirit resistance and more bullet resistance.
Yeah,
So characters like Haze, Vindicta, sort of been, well, Haze has been nerfed anyway,
yeah,
but they've also sort of been secondary nerfed, I guess, by that reaction where just there's more bullet resistance on the board. You run into a tough Haze, get return fire because
yes,
return fire gives you so much bullet resistance and it also shoots them back that
yeah,
a Haze will end up killing themselves by accident if they just ult people with all of them having return fire.
yeah,
So there's a lot of like funny interactions like that, but it does make a lot of spirit characters like again the whole Ivy thing. Infernus is ridiculously strong right now.
hmm
Even stuff like Yamato, which is like what you were saying before of like with like track log and stuff like what's meta. Yamato was always considered niche. Even like McGinnis was considered super niche, one of the worst characters in the game.
yeah,
They were playing a good amount this tournament, and they had a really good win rate as well because people either didn't have a McGinnis player on their team, or they just didn't know how to play up against a good McGinnis that wasn't like in just solo queue. By the way, have you ever heard of the player 242?
no,
It was a McGinnis one trick that would literally only just split push. They
oh
would
okay.
have their lane and they would keep pushing. They would go like 2 and 22, but they would always win. And every time that they died, they would type ow in chat. And there's this really good like video. I'll have to link it and you can put it in the description of just people like Show4 and Buds and stuff just tilting at the fact that they have this 242 player in their game
Yeah.
that is literally just like a glorified creep. They're doing the same run, the same one every time, but they just always win. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. So it's cool to see people like limit testing stuff like that. I know a lot of the players were like, we want to see them get like banned essentially, but it's such a risky thing to do, right? Because you end up in what Overwatch had was like, do you ban the Torbjorn one trick?
Oh,
Well,
right.
they're still
Okay.
trying to win, right? And not
Yeah.
hero switching and stuff. Like, is it considered griefing if you're doing that as 242? But also, I mean, in the future, there'll be a pick and ban phase. If they're on the other team, just ban McGinnis. What are they going to do? Right. So it's things like that, I suppose, of just seeing how the game can be pushed because it's very easy, I think, especially for high elo players to go, this is the only way to play this character. Any other way is trolling. We've been
hmm
hearing now with a lot of pro players being like, this character's trash, never played him. And suddenly it turns out that the character's actually kind of good, or they got
Yeah.
buffed and now they're really good, and nobody knows how to deal with them.
Yeah. I feel like for the stage that the game is in now, where there's just so many changes, new heroes coming out, the map is just changing drastically from patch to patch. I think it would be a disservice to have too many types of programs that just like isolate players. Like, I mean, I was talking to Piggy about the pugs that they have in these, high elo European lobbies and everything. They're trying to just like have pickup games with the people that they think are worthy of being in them, and I think that's fine. I think there's like levels to it. I think that the theory crafting can come out and climb a leaderboard, but I also think that there should be a space for people that are trying to take it competitively. Because I don't know, I just don't know how much I even trust the elo system right now to match you against like. Sometimes I'm playing games and they're like complete stomps. Sometimes I'm getting ran over or my team's getting ran over. It's like it still feels like sometimes I'd rather just make sure that those 30 to 45 minutes I'm dedicating towards a game are
Mhm.
more productive in general, even if some of the outskirt solo queue guys are the ones that are pushing the meta in different directions.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, even Valve have said as much that like their MMR isn't working as intended. And I think
Hmm.
from what I know, they're like A/B testing different like matchmaking algorithms and stuff, whether it's
Okay.
like lane focused or character focused.
Hmm.
Sort of remains to be seen, but I'd say like, yeah, it makes the whole like Nico score stuff even more outrageous
Yeah.
that people care about it because matchmaking objectively doesn't work very well in this game as of right now.
Yeah,
Especially if
yeah.
I'm queuing at like 9 a.m. in the morning, which I usually do. I'd usually just go into the NA servers because it'd still be up at that time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So playing at that time in Europe, of course, you're going to get horrendously unbalanced games.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like the way it is at the moment, but it is a playtest. Just play the game and not worry about fake MMRs and all that jazz.
What do you think about some of the other updates? Like, did any, how about, let's do this. For hero buffs and nerfs, are there any that really drastically change? You talked about Haze a little bit already with like bullet resist being more prevalent, but are there any other ones that you think stood out? Like this hero has moved up or down a number of tiers.
Um, Bits and pieces, yeah. Like I don't think any character in particular was buffed at all.
Right. It feels like
From
they're
like
doing
going,
like the opposite of
yeah,
power creep in this.
yeah, sort of tuning. I think the only one that's had like positive upgrades has been like Yamato in some areas. But yeah, if anybody kind of gets buffed, they're nerfed somewhere else as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only one that was just straight up buffed was Lady Geist, but I'd still say that she's better. Like she's definitely stronger. You run into some Lady Geist players that will just 1 versus 6
Yeah.
often. And I think at least for Lady Geist, it's like she might not necessarily be that strong like in a pro coordinated setting, but I think her like archetype, her role, her job as a character is pretty clear cut. Like just the amount of damage she can do. She is a bit of a tank herself, but she's also very like anti-tank.
Yeah.
So she's really good against like those big strong characters. She basically is the hero that you don't want to go near
Mm-hmm.
because she can just silence you with her two, or obviously life swap if she's low. Um, but I think it's people like Zergy and stuff have said in the past, she's just too slow in
Yeah.
comparison to other characters. When you've got Paradox and stuff like that running rings around people,
Yeah.
um, it just feels like Lady Geist doesn't bring as much to the table. It's sort of the same for Grey Talon, really, as well. Like, I love the builds around his ultimate. Like, the stuff the Vegas builds to just have guided owls every, like, 5 seconds. Like, it's just Harry Potter just sending them out, like, to and fro. But it
Yeah.
just feels like they tried changing his like Rain of Arrows thing where you
Yeah.
can alternate fire from the ground.
Yes.
But
Yes.
I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was on this podcast or somewhere else. It might be Zergy. Like it makes no sense having a character jump up in the air and then
Oh
shoot
yeah, I said that to
horizontally.
Zergy. Yeah, you're to
Yeah,
change your y-axis to now create more uncertainty with the shot while you have an x-axis buff. It just doesn't make sense. Like, why did you introduce? Why did you? Why would an ability have like you're taking away the advantage of a spread shot by making you in the air where people are now on 3 planes? That just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
yeah, and it doesn't feel great to be damaged by it either because you're like
Yeah.
they're so far away. I'm being hit by like 3 bullets, but they still like 150 damage to me.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But yeah, like it does really feel like just going through them like in a word. Abrams got nerfed with his like passive like resistance, resilience, and like the
Resilience. Yeah.
regen he gets from that. Um, his Siphon Life does better. They made the charge feel so much nicer now. Like
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't like playing Abrams because he was clunky as hell. He's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
been clunky as hell. But it feels like it wasn't even him getting buffed. It was more they made shoulder charge feel more rewarding and less clunky.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly we're like, oh yeah, this character's really good. So that is an improvement. Like Bebop got nerfed with like his range.
Yeah.
Dynamo's ult got nerfed. Ray Talon got changed, not going to do much. Ace got hit with a lot. I think
Yeah.
she's still good, but it does feel a little bit like she was too good kind of everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even think like playing them must have been that exciting because you're just farming it for Ricochet, you're farming it for
Yep.
Unstoppable, and then
Yep.
you're good to go.
Yep.
Which is a very MOBA thing, but at the same time,
I knew
you
it.
don't want it to just sort of feel like that's just the path that you have to go down every single time with this character.
I knew exactly what I was doing every Haze game. I didn't like to like Haze is my second most played behind Paradox, and I just knew what I was getting myself into every single game, except for like I started to kind of experiment more with like mid game play because you would because your sleep dagger actually provides a lot of setup. You could, if you hit
Yeah,
one
yeah.
kind of when you were rotating around, that could lead to something different happening. But if I miss it, well, move on to the next camp that I'm gonna farm or the next wave that I'm gonna farm. So now it's been such a big nerf. Like the dagger is worse. The you're taking more damage while you're in your bullet dance, so you kind of need more defensive items. But when I was talking to Zergy before, he talked about just the fact that like you want to build so much vitality on Haze as it is that it almost needed to happen because Haze could practically just be in a fight forever, just keep life like bullet lifesteal, leech. You're gonna have
Yeah.
some defensive items like some improved spirit armor, and then you would just use your ultimate on top of the fact that you're leeching, and you're just hitting everybody with so many bullets that your damage is just so high you never even really needed anything to buff that. And Ricochet was always just there to help you farm, and of course obviously when you're just shooting people in fights, yeah, you'll do some spread damage.
Yeah. Ivy's definitely the weirdest one because they I think again, the problem that Deadlock has at the moment is a lot of the spirit focused characters. You want to call them like enchanters and like spellcasters, I suppose, from like other MOBAs. A lot of those characters in Deadlock, their gun build is always so much better. Like
Mm,
Kelvin gun builds, Viscous gun builds, Ivy gun builds when it was like the Siphon Life, rushed out as soon as possible, literally have 600 DPS on your weapon
yeah.
20 minutes into the game or something ridiculous. It's still a bit of a problem now, I think, too. But I think that's why they've sort of added in more bullet resistance and less spirit resistance because they want to push people into not building gun Yamato, not building gun Grey Talon because their weapons should suck in comparison to their utility. But the problem is those guns suck, but they scale really well, so you end up having like crazy Kelvin builds, right? That Listic was running, which also got nerfed. And Kelvin is still good. I think it's just people adjusting to moving back to be more spirit based.
Hmm.
Um, Moan Curl got hit with a lot as well. Um, but I think people are moving away from him naturally anyway, just because decay him, heal bane him, keep him at bay. Just don't play in stupid positions. If he has Phantom Strike, call it and pray that he doesn't jump on you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like funnily enough, like it was a big patch with all of the stuff it had in it, but like re-looking at a lot of the like, hero balance changes, it was just like making sure that seven stun wasn't
Oh
too long
yeah.
because you do the Echo Shard double stun
Yep. Yep.
BS and stuff.
Yeah.
Shiv got nerfed again, makes sense. Vindicta, kind of about the same. Viscous got nerfed really hard as well with like the cube because it used to
Yeah.
be that if you cubed somebody, you'd cleanse them. So if they
Yeah.
had pockets affliction on them, you'd the amount of times it's like, oh, I got pocket ulted, cube,
Yep.
cancel, and then you're just fine. So I do like that change because I think the other like points that you could put into the cube weren't amazing other than increasing the cooldown.
Hmm.
So at least forces people in that direction more if you want to go in it. Um, and then Warden stuff changed a bit, and Yamato stuff changed ever so slightly. I think most of the stuff's probably in the items, but only specific ones, right? Like Echo Shard is like the big one. The fact, like, there's so many builds that's just, McGinnis
Yeah.
Echo Shard with a wall, like it's
Yep.
crazy strong, and it's still considered strong now. I'd say stuff like Veil Walker giving you like 20% fire rate when you use it just made that like crazy impactful, and then just other bits and pieces elsewhere. I'm pretty sure. Um, yeah, it was a good like. I do like these patches that we're getting from Deadlock at the moment because they're, from the sounds of it, just typical Ice Frog balance updates where it's like 2% nerf, 2% buff, like
Yep.
small changes. Even if a character doesn't need changing, I think sometimes just from like Dota people telling me they will just make balance changes for the sake of making balance changes. They're like, this is too stale now. Let's just liven it up a bit. Let's go do this instead.
Yeah, they do just kind of. I mean, with Dota, there's like they had. I forgot the technical term for it, but it's like the stuff on like your decision tree, and also now it's like your innate ability. Like at the beginning of a Dota game, you have to kind of almost choose one of two paths now of like how you're gonna play your hero before the game even starts, and it's kind of interesting, but it's also kind of annoying too. Overall, I feel like, well, okay, what about? Do you think I asked like Zergy and I've asked Piggy this same question. I guess, do you think right now that there's any character? I mean, there's been Lady Geist buffs in a few directions,
Mhm.
so I think that could have moved her, but I still didn't see her a lot at the Deadlock at the downtown event. So do you think like would you consider, and you don't have to say F tier, but like would you say anybody's like the bottom tier of heroes right now?
Um, Not really.
Hmm.
I sort of like in the pro scene, it's a bit harder. Again, if you want to call it pro scene, but like yeah, like in that kind of coordinated level of play, like Geist was played a bit at Downtown Showdown, but you've got players like Poofy Cat, which was on Nouns, that loves to play Geist. So there's just some like characters that people naturally gravitate towards, I suppose. But like, I feel it is just a bit like Great Talon doesn't have enough to sort of bring him up to the same level. But is that just people not really exploring it as much, or just needs a tune in here or there?
Hmm.
It's also like if you buff him and you make like his ultimate even stronger, does that become viable, or does it become like a meme build? Like
Yeah,
all
it's
of
like
the
the
stuff with
only thing
Ivy
he
at the
can do.
moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you look at the stuff with like Ivy, like the range of her ult and all of that ridiculous stuff at the moment, like 90k damage for a grand final thing on a supporty kind of hero, you kind of know that okay, that's just going to get patched. Like that's not going to be staying in the game anytime soon, or at least it's going to be brought down a peg or two.
Hmm.
Same with like Bebop when he had his ult buffed, and then like a couple of days later, yeah, we're going to tone that down a bit because that's actually really ridiculous that he's able to do so much of that. But
Yeah.
yeah, to answer your question, like I don't want to say that there's a character that's just outright bad because people thought that was McGinnis, and then McGinnis actually ended up being quite impactful in the right hands.
Yep.
But it does sort of feel a little bit like Seven doesn't offer as much as some of the other like carry characters like Wraith and Haze. Maybe people will explore that a bit more. Hard to know. But yeah, like Geist, we'll wait and see if people can make her look scary and how they make her look scary. But outside of that, like Grey Talon, maybe like Warden is the one that sort of feels a little bit like he needs a bit more like love in certain areas because he's a very beige character anyway.
Yeah.
But also like you sort of look at him and go, yeah, maybe like in just solo play it's not going to be great, but in the pro scene, surely that kind of character would be like crazy overpowered. And it's just not the case. Like not
Hmm.
really picked, low win rate as well when he is picked and prioritized. It just doesn't feel as impactful as some of the other like run it down tanky characters like Abrams or Mo and Krill or Shiv, for example. So
Hmm.
it's more just some characters that need a little bit of love potentially, or need exploring a little bit more.
Now, what would you say on the other hand? And I first of all, I agree with you. Like I feel like the fact that McGinnis is everybody's kind of had this coming to McGinnis moment of just like recognizing that there's like
Yeah.
a lot in this pack in this the wall being incredibly powerful. The fact that you could kind of like lean into a spirit build makes your damage just very annoying to deal with. And yeah, having two walls with the Echo Shard, or just like and even having more turrets and everything, like your abilities are very powerful despite being, uh, I don't know, they just kind of feel like maybe like underwhelming, and she's not as mobile as you would want as some of the characters in the game. But you kind of can tailor your team around that a little bit more than maybe people thought
Oh, for
before.
sure.
So
Yeah, it's funny
yeah.
because you know when I was saying before about like playing around like the macro side of your walk has been pushed, you push theirs. We played a team. I wouldn't say who, but we like scrimmed a team that had like McGinnis turrets set up in a way that once they worked out that we were multiple people heading towards one of their walkers, they would push the other side. And it
Hmm.
was like playing Valorant. It was like Killjoy was just in the server and just like the macro like side of the game. And it was really cool to see that kind of like show up realistically and go, that in itself seems like a really strong thing to do of just having turrets set up to give you feelers on how many people are around and seeing them on a mini map and
Yeah.
then making a call based on what gets triggered, right? Like that
Okay.
in itself is crazy strong eventually when some of the game sense and macros been built up a little bit more.
Right. So there's definitely use cases for that, but I mean, I would just still just agree that Gray Talon's probably in my like lowest. I just feel like the kit, it's not the most synergistic. I feel like I feel like you would probably still favor like a Vindicta in a lot of ways if you want. I mean, going jump at least like going in the air, doing a lot of damage in a single shot. Sure, it doesn't have the same utility as an owl that you can kind of scout with, you can stun people with, but it's still a lot of damage in a single second, and it's a lot easier to interact with your team closer to them with your Vindicta than if you're Grey Talon. So I sort of favor her there. How about on the good side though? How about on the good side of like S tier characters that are basically always contested or popping up?
Yeah. I mean, Dynamo's the obvious one, but I think Dynamo's frustrating because he's in this sort of catch 22 where he is so strong because all of his abilities are crazy good,
Hmm.
but he is just miserable to play because like he's just so good that like laning with him is just playing him full stop. I used to main him initially, but again, because like bullet damage has been reduced, which he does a lot of, he doesn't feel as impactful. He's not very good at just doing stuff on his own. He can't lane on his own in comparison to other characters. And you do just sort of turn into a bit of an ult bot, which
Yeah.
like it's fine if you're good at getting those pickoffs, but it's the 90% of the rest of the game where you're not ulting or setting up for ults that you have to be able to catch up with people and still farm and not be left behind because you need stuff like refresher and increased duration and reduce cooldown. And there's still only so much that you can potentially do, right? So that feels like one of those characters that is usually banned a lot, but when it's picked, it's usually teams that are like, wait, we've never really played Dynamo. We're just playing him because we know he's so good
Mm.
and we don't get to play him often because he's banned out so often. So it's just a bit of a well, we suck at the character that is incredibly OP, and it feels like nobody's crazy good at Dynamo anyway
Oh,
because
okay.
there's only so much that you can realistically do. You're just playing support for everybody else. Um, but for actual characters that I think that are doing a lot without having too much attention focused on them, like Infernus 100%. Like I think it was 36 games that were played this tournament. He was in 35.
Oh, wow.
And like
Okay.
there was a couple of bans that they had towards the end in like the grand finals and stuff, but he's just a character that is so strong that people would love to play him. Pretty easy to pick up and play to an extent. It's just about farming and keeping ahead and trying to get to a like position two, I suppose, if you're looking at it from a Dota perspective. Um, and just mowing people down. But
Hmm.
like you're never gonna ban him because he's not like Dynamo, he's not like Pocket, which can be
Yeah.
super like game warping, right? So like Infernus is just kind of getting away with murder to an extent, and with like he does a lot of gun damage, but he also does a tremendous amount of spirit damage.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so spirit being like the new wave, you don't need to change anything. He is still good, if not better, from playing him the same way as before. And
Hmm.
then you've got items like ammo scavenger that the more that you confirm and deny the souls have to get in, your spirit goes up.
Yep.
You get that. You get infuser, which you activate in ink. So you're just melting people. It's the same with Wraith. Wraith is really popular now because you would just have your free cards, get an extra charge, have your free cards, you're fighting somebody, they're relatively low. You've used ammo scavenger to get like 20 extra spirit or whatever. You
Yeah.
use infuser, card, they're dead. You just burst them down like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's even stuff of Wraiths using like shadow weave and turning yourself into just a better haze because you just sneak around the
Oh.
map, find a target, ult
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and then the rest of your team just jumps on them.
Okay.
Like it's
Yeah.
like it's got to a point now that I'm glad that we're seeing more like ability focused builds instead of just gun X. But now some characters are just way too skewed, and I
Yeah.
think ammo scavenger and infuser are just enabling that a lot more. Like Yamato with those two items is ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
And even like Kelvin, just some of the like ability strength builds that you can go for still melt people with the beam despite it being nerfed like 4 times in a row.
Yes. Yeah. That thing is still just so strong. I can't like it's so oppressive still every game I see it. Yeah. Okay. I think that's a pretty good catch up. I'm glad we did this. I feel like we're gonna do more in the future. So
Yeah.
yeah, this has gone just a little bit over an hour, and that's where usually I call it. But I guess Ryan, anything you want to shout out in terms of stuff that you're putting out there or people you're working with or anything really?
Yeah, I mean, I want to make more content because, like, from a YouTuber initially, I want to sort of do some Deadlock stuff. I think I'm just a little bit scared that I don't want people to go and see it and be like, oh, Ryan's like completely just ditching everything to
Yeah.
try it in his third game now. But It's like it's a game that I enjoy a lot on. Like Valorant is pretty chill at the moment anyway, so like there's no better opportunity to just go like fully into this game and just immerse yourself. And so yeah, like with everything talking about like the not only the pick rates and win rates of the characters in this like recent tournament, but like also working out like priority order, like who's been banned out the most, who's sort of a common first, second pick. And so there should be a video going out on just Ryan Central that should be going over all of that and talking about which characters are like high priority with a high win rate versus like middle in priority characters that have a like low win rate, right? Like Mo and Krill is kind of just suffering a little bit at the moment, but characters like McGinnis, Bebop, Rafe, Abrams are all like looking really sharp at the moment. So it's just kind of going through the tournament and just talking about what's been used and how it's been used, and then we'll see. I know Defi mostly streams the scrims that we have for
Mm.
TF2 Boomers, so you can always check out him. Otherwise, just keep an eye out for the TF2 Boomers team in tournaments and be sure to try and watch along and support the OG Valve people that are trying to carry on TF3, I suppose, into this game.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate having you on. Glad we got to do this, and I'll link everything that you said in the description below. I'll be sure to message you about that. And either way, thanks so much. And as always, guys, being toxic is a choice.